Today's topic is promoting creativity. We're going to look at ways to incorporate the visual arts, music, movement, dance, storytelling, and even cooking into your curriculum. We're going to start this lesson by asking the question, why is creativity even important? Creativity is important because the world is changing at a far greater pace than it ever has before. And we need to learn how to cope with these new challenges that we're faced with every single day. We need to learn how to think creatively and divergently in order to solve these problems. Without the ability for individuals to take risks, nothing will ever change. Unfortunately, many early childhood teachers don't believe this way. They focus only on the academic content. They make sure that children are spending their time learning rather than playing, as if the two were actually separable. And they assess, as if that was the only way to demonstrate mastery of a concept. As a teacher, it's your job to nurture and cultivate the creativity in each and every single one of your students. In this way, they'll grow to become problem solvers and divergent thinkers and leaders in our society. Creativity is a process of growth and development. It's not something that you just acquire overnight. It doesn't come naturally or easily. It takes practice and repetition and time, true free time, in order for a child to discover their own creativity. Creativity is not what the child produces as an end result. It's what they are learning along the way. Creative thinking matters, not only in the classroom, but in the real world. It's not just for artists or writers. It's for business people trying to think of a new way to close a deal. It's for teachers trying to think of a new way to teach their students. It's for engineers who are trying to think of a new way to solve a problem, or a cook who's trying to think of a new recipe. Modern researcher Kizminski defines creativity as an idea that is original, valued, and implemented. But what does this look like in the classroom? In education, we refer to this style of teaching as learner-centered instruction. LCI fosters opportunities for learners to draw upon their own experiences and interpretations. It requires teachers to understand their learners' perspectives and support them in accomplishing their goals. Through this, learning becomes genuine, connected, and creative. In early childhood education, we refer to this as emergent curriculum. Emergent curriculum is a philosophy of teaching that follows the interest of the child. It creates meaningful learning experiences that are child-centered. It is initiated by the child and supported through inquiry and play. Emergent curriculum fosters whole child development rather than only focusing on one content area at a time. Projects are designed around the children's interests, and they last only as long as the interest remains strong. By fostering this kind of creativity in the early years, we produce a generation of great thinkers. Implementing creative activities in your classroom is easy, and you probably already have all the supplies that you'll need. Unit blocks are a great way to encourage creativity. When children build with blocks, they're learning so much more than just construction. They are learning how to experiment with cause and effect, how to negotiate and cooperate with their peers. They learn how to design and create a plan and follow it through to the end. They learn how to transfer ideas from paper to real life. They develop their abstract and spatial reasoning further. And they build important connections between play and logical reasoning. By allowing young children to build with blocks in your classroom, you foster a sense of curiosity and risk-taking. You empower them to think outside of the box, a skill that will follow them throughout their academic journey. When I was teaching, I would allow my children to leave their block structures up for the entire week. This meant that they could build something on Monday and have 5 full days to extend on it, to elaborate on it, to create designs and patterns, and even to extend it into socio-dramatic play. Sometimes their structures would even find their way into the curriculum. For example, if the children were building a boat, we'd start reading books about boats. We'd talk about pirates or Christopher Columbus, and we might even do some sink or float activities at the sensory table. These structures were great conversation pieces. At lunch, the kids would talk about their design and their plans to make it better. They would collaborate with each other and come up with some really creative ideas. On the last day of the week, the structures had to be disassembled, but that was okay because it was a very fun process of knocking everything down. The children knew that they'd have the opportunity to build again, starting fresh the next week. There are so many benefits to block play. Blocks are motivating and interesting. They stimulate curiosity and provide endless creativity. Unlike traditional toys, blocks are open-ended. They have endless combinations and outcomes, and they promote hands-on learning. A child-centered approach to learning through active participation and discovery. Blocks promote the well-being of the whole child. They learn physical development through moving and lifting and carrying. They learn cognitive development by balancing, problem-solving, and sorting shapes. They learn social development by sharing ideas and making decisions. And they learn emotional development by expressing their thoughts, taking risks, and having a sense of pride over their accomplishments. When setting up your classroom for blocks, make sure that they're arranged in such a way that it's easy for children to access them. Arrange the blocks lengthwise if possible so that the children know how big they are before they pull them out. Try not to overcrowd the shelves so that young children don't become overwhelmed by all their choices. Create labels for each of the different shapes of blocks so that children know where to find them when the time comes. This will also help them and you at cleanup time. If you're teaching younger children, you might even want to introduce the blocks a little bit at a time. At the beginning of the school year, just offer half the blocks. In November, maybe offer a little bit more, and then by January, give them full access to build. If you have infants or toddlers, you might consider hollow blocks. These blocks are large and open-ended and easy for children to carry and manage. They allow children to build large structures in a safe environment, giving them a sense of power and a feeling of accomplishment. Consider adding props and accessories to your block area. Pretend people, community members, animals, vehicles, and traffic signs. You might even want to incorporate some train sets or a road rug. Offer them books about building and paper and pencil and crayons to create designs. And focus on the process rather than the product. Cooking with children fosters the same kind of creative development. When children cook, they're not only introduced to practical life skills, but also important academic concepts, including reading, science, and math. Time spent together in the kitchen encourages interaction and communication between children and their teachers. They learn how to make healthy meals, they widen their palate, and establish good eating habits at an early age. They share a sense of accomplishment and the enjoyment of each other's company. By offering children the opportunity to cook in your classroom, you help them develop in many ways. They build self-confidence. They feel important and needed. They come to understand that working together as a team produces greater results than working alone. They are also exposed to sensory experiences. Cooking is one of the only activities that you can do with a child that involves all 5 of their senses. They learn how to use their ears, eyes, nose, mouth, and hands to observe. They learn how to roll, knead, mix, spread, and squeeze. They learn differences in textures and temperatures when they play with dough and water. They become familiar with the sounds of a kitchen, as well as what each of those sounds mean. And they learn differences in taste and texture as they experiment with new food groups. When you cook with children, you also help them develop enthusiasm for science and math. They learn how to measure ingredients and how to play with cause and effect. They also learn how to experiment with differences in amounts. For example, if you use less flour and more water, your ingredients will be thin. They'll have to be mixed. But if you use less water and more flour, your ingredients will be thick and you'll have to knead them. When children cook, they learn how to recognize numbers. They're introduced to fractions and they come to understand concepts of more than, less than. They're also introduced to different states of matter. For example, water as a solid, liquid, or gas. And they learn how to make predictions based on experience. For example, what will happen if I add too much water to the flour? When you cook with children, they learn how to think creatively and use their imagination. They have the opportunity to express themselves in a creative way, to problem solve, and to experiment. When you're cooking with kiddos, let them experiment with new ingredients. Choose recipes that have variations so that every child can choose what ingredient stands out to them. For example, if you're baking muffins, give them the option for chocolate chips, or bananas, or blueberries. Research shows that children who are invested in preparing their own food are much more likely to actually eat it. The broader range of food that you introduce to them, the broader their palate will become. And this will help them as they come to develop healthy eating habits. I know that involving little ones in this process can be more challenging, more time-consuming, and even more messy. But I promise it is absolutely worth it. Try some creative activities with your children this week. I can't wait to see what you come up with.